watching NWCN Northwest Cable News. And now, an in-depth half-hour exploring one of the day's top stories. 30 minutes, one topic. This is Northwest Extra with Cam Johnson.
He was our first whale, the one we cheered on to go free. We watched him leave the Newport Aquarium in a sling, ready to start a new life in Iceland. And 6 weeks ago, we all breathed a huge sigh of relief when it looked like Keiko finally broke his bonds with people and was swimming with his native pod in Iceland. But that's all changed. Keiko's abandoned his pod in favor of Norwegian fjords and folks willing to feed him by hand. Keiko's setback, that's the focus of tonight's edition of Northwest Extra. Good evening, I'm Cam Johnson. In tonight's show, we will get the very latest on Keiko. We'll talk with Dr. Paul Spong, director of Orca Lab, and Michael Harris, president of the Orca Conservancy, and get their take on what's happening with Keiko right now. And a former trainer of Keiko, Stephen Clausen, explains what may be going on with Keiko and what should be done next. But first, let's get the very latest on Keiko the killer whale. NWCN's Meg Coyle brings us up to date.
Fake lutefisk in Lefse. That's right, Keiko is the new favorite son of Norway. But that's not necessarily a good thing. Seems Keiko's gotten a little too far off the beaten path.
From Iceland to Norway, new pictures show Keiko's come a long way since leaving his pen in Iceland. Here shown swimming in a Norwegian fjord some 900 miles away, as kids get a free ride on Free Willy. A real treat for his unsuspecting hosts. But those who know Keiko best worry he's swimming right into trouble.
We have to separate him from people and boats, and this is very exciting for people, I'm sure, but not what we'd like to have happen for Keiko. It's a step backwards, really, for his progress to be reintroduced into the wild.
Other experts argue there's more to the story. Michael Harris with Orca Conservancy admits he's disappointed to see Keiko hamming it up with humans again, but says it's important to note his progress.
What Keiko just taught us is that he individually learned how to adapt to a food source and fattened himself up crossing the Atlantic.
No doubt Keiko has come far. Having spent most of his life in captivity, volunteers spent years training him for life in the wild. 6 weeks ago, he left his pen in Iceland with a pod of distant relatives. Now alone in Norway, that wasn't what anyone had in mind.
I don't think it's necessarily a failure of the project.
Steve Clausen trained Keiko for 6 years at the Newport Aquarium. He now wonders if Keiko's too tame to return to his wild ways.
He obviously could be showing that he prefers human companionship to wild killer whale companionship, because if he had preferred wild killer whales, he would have stayed with them.
What happens next is now up for debate. One thing experts know for sure, Keiko's great Norwegian adventure could have been worse.
With Norway, they still kill whales, so we had some concern that he might become lunch. Instead, he's getting fed lunch.
For now, Keiko's handlers will continue to monitor his movements as they try to figure out how to steer him clear of people and boats and back with other whales again. As for his health, Keiko's lead veterinarian reviewed pictures of the Free Willy star from his Norwegian visit and says Keiko is fit and thriving. I'm Meg Coyle reporting in the newsroom.
Well, joining me down by phone is Dr. Paul Spong, director of Orca Lab on Vancouver Island at the northern end. Dr. Spong, what is your take on what's happening in this setback with Keiko?
Well, Cam, I actually don't consider it to be much of a setback. I think that the news about Keiko is fabulous. He's done this incredible journey all the way from Iceland to Norway, and he's absolutely proven his capability to feed himself successfully and basically to essentially live an independent life as a wild whale. He does have, of course, a continuing difficulty in the sense that he was trained for so many years to associate with people, and that's something that's a problem that I think has to be faced and dealt with in some manner. But the great news about Keiko is that he is well, and that he has successfully crossed the Atlantic and done this journey and is in wonderful physical shape. And I think that's good news, and we just, got to celebrate that.
Absolutely. And while we're not trying to diminish that great news, you would have to obviously prefer that Keiko would be enjoying the company of wild whales right now. What does this say anything about Keiko's ability to relate to other wild whales?
Well, I think it says a number of things. One is, and everybody knew this right from the start, we did not understand exactly where Keiko fit in terms of the social scene with orcas in Iceland. There's been some genetic work done which shows that he has been swimming among whales that are not too distantly related from him, but there's been no evidence that he's been swimming with whales that are his closest relatives. And that's, of course, in orca society, the key thing. What has happened this past summer, in the early part of the summer, was that he was spending very long periods of time with other whales near Vestmannaeyjar in Iceland. And he was succeeding, I think, in making extensive contact with them. Now, of course, he took off on this journey. And we'll see what happens next. You know, he's been with other species of cetaceans. In the meantime, he was observed from the air at one point among a number of different species of cetaceans. And now he's reached the Norwegian coast. He started to go north, and then he ran into people. And that's a bit of a distraction for him. But it's not the end of his journey, Cam. It's just the beginning, and I think it's a fabulous tale, and we're all going to be enthralled by it.
Dr. Paul Spong, thank you so much. Let's bring in some of our other guests. We also have Michael Harris, president of the Orca Conservancy, and Steve Clausen, Keiko's former trainer at the Newport Aquarium in Newport, Oregon. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
What do you think? If Keiko has strayed from the pod, does that mean that Keiko has distanced himself, or he's not being shunned by the pod in any way, do you think?
Well, it's very difficult to make any real assessment with the fact that he left 6 weeks ago and has not been visually observed for 6 weeks. So you don't know if he's been with animals for that 6 weeks. There's really no evidence whether he was or was not.
All we know is that he swam off with the whales,
and he's been gone for 6 weeks, and they've tracked him with satellite telemetry showing where he's gone, but there's been no visual observation or documentation of him being with whales. So who knows how long it's been?
I tell you what we do know. We do know that this animal was once in a little tank in Mexico City with 80-degree tap water, pouring salt water, pouring salt literally around the outside of the pool to make it salt water. And look where he is now. This animal just did a 1,000-mile journey on his own with some whales, 60 days. Shows up in Norway, fat.
Well,
I mean, seriously, I mean, he's at least the weight that he was when he left, and possibly more.
There's an assessment that we can't really back up either, because having a veterinarian look at pictures from California is no way to do a health assessment, and that's where we feel very strongly.
It sounds like you're a little concerned.
Well, we just want to do what's responsible. We want to do what's best for Keiko. That's always been the statement, is what's best for Keiko. And him being free is a goal that all the former staff has always wanted for him. I mean, we were the ones who taught him how to eat live fish. We were the ones who taught him how to leave the bay pen after we transported him to Iceland. We were the ones who taught him to go to Wales. So our concern is doing what's responsible and what's right for Keiko, and it's a choice that has always been up to him. And now I'm saying this is not the end of the project by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm all for continuing to try it. We just need documentation.
I think, if anything, the spotlight on Keiko is now growing, now that he's now that he's kind of endearing himself to a new nation of people who whale. This is, I can't wait to talk to my cousins in Norway and find out if their views about whaling are being changed because of this lovable whale hanging out amongst their fjords.
Well, I tell you, Cam, Dr. Lanny Cornell, who's the veterinarian for the project, has said this animal is healthy. He feels strong enough to make public comments saying, the evidence that I've seen, the photographic evidence, shows this animal to be really healthy. This is an amazing journey, an amazing accomplishment, and a long line of accomplishments. And if the ex-trainers want to refute Lanny Cornell's advice on this, then you know, they should speak up and say that.
Well, basically, all we are actually hoping for is a full health assessment of this animal, and that would be doing something that he's trained to do.
Recapturing him.
No, would be just going out in a boat, getting in the water, and measuring him, what's called morphometrics.
Right.
You take measurements of his girth, which is the best way for telling if an animal has gained or lost weight without pulling him out of the water and putting him in a stretcher.
I know there has been controversy from the very beginning with Keiko and different wildlife organizations and different pro-whale organizations, but I don't really understand the clash that's going on here and what we're witnessing here, what we're listening to.
I think there's some validity to say that everybody involved with this project, the Humane Society, Free Willy Keiko Foundation, Orca Lab, some of these other organizations, Ocean Futures, and the ex-trainers all have the ultimate goal. They want to see Willy be free.
There are disagreements about how that happens.
It's a disagreement about what is the capacity of killer whales, what is the capacity of Keiko. Keiko has proven the naysayers wrong every step of the way. Their big contention right now is that Keiko can't catch food on his own. He can't forage. We just heard a few days ago he's starving. And now we're hearing he's gone 1,000 miles. He's probably eaten 6,000 pounds of fish.
See, once again, that's, we hope that's true, but we have no evidence that that can be true. There were killer whales that were captured back in 1979 up here in Washington.
We're well aware of that, yeah.
That lived for 2 months without any food intake. They refused to eat even though food was regularly offered to them. So that shows that the animals can go 60 days without food intake.
But some people would say, with all the care and training that Keiko has had up to this point, they would say, now at some point we have to say, Keiko, do your thing.
Be free, Willie. Be free.
I'm all for continuing to do that. I think that, for him, the mental stimulation, because he's a solitary animal in Iceland, I think the mental stimulation of being in the wild is great, and it's what he's supposed to do. But we just need to make sure that we're doing it responsibly and that he's going to survive.
Are you suggesting that that other organizations are painting a rosier picture of Keiko's condition right now?
I think that's a fair assumption.
And what would their motivation be? Why would they try to paint a rosier picture?
I just think that, maybe some of the animal activist organizations would like at all costs to see this animal free so that they can continue to pursue freeing all cetaceans in captivity. And I'm not saying all organizations, I'm just saying that there are some organizations out there that may be thinking of
And conversely, the captive aquariums who don't want to see this succeed are really coming to the fore on this project. And it's really upsetting in a lot of ways. And this is not about zeal and about animal activism. This is about science. There's not a single scientist, orca scientist, who would say that an animal can go 1,000 miles without feeding itself. Can you say that?
I cannot make that statement, but the animals that live for 2 months without a food intake, they're showing that, Keiko's only been not fed for 6 weeks.
But 71 meters of diving.
You talk about science, though.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We're going to take a quick break. It's amazing how Keiko continues to be in the middle of this tug of war, even as he is swimming in the fjords of Norway. We'll continue this, and we'll get back to Keiko. We'll talk a little bit more about how Keiko is doing. And up next, Mark Coleman is going to take a look at your back-to-school forecast. Do you think it was too much to ask of Keiko that after years of performing and being around humans that he just readjust and go back to the wild? We will hear more from one of his former trainers, Stephen Clausen, and orca expert Michael Harris next.
Watching NWCN, Northwest Extra.
Free Willy was the rallying cry to get Keiko back to his native waters off the coast of Iceland. After years of reacclimation and sea walks, it looks like he had finally broken his bond with people until this weekend, when he found himself in the fjords of Norway, following boats, frolicking with swimmers, and generally enjoying himself with his human family. Still with us in our studio is Michael Harris, president of the Orca Conservancy, and Stephen Clausen, one of Keiko's former trainers when Keiko lived at the Newport Aquarium in Newport, Oregon. I was a reporter at the Newport Aquarium the first day that the public was able to see him, and I got in there before any of the people got to come through. And I remember looking at Keiko and having him look right back at me, and thinking at that moment that I had really made a connection with this whale and that we were kind of taking each other in. It was amazing, and I feel like I really understand why so many people adore this whale and why the people of Norway now must be feeling some of the same feelings. But I have to wonder what is next for Keiko and what is realistic. What do you think?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I think right now we have this amazing success story with Keiko. He's crossed the ocean. He's made this amazing journey. His only crime right now is that people are jumping in the water and feeding him and playing with him. And you know, we all love Keiko. And it's, what do you do at this point? I think it sounds to me like Stephen and the ex-trainers say, well, you know, we should recapture him, we should bring him in. A while back they're saying we should go out and capture him, stick a tube down his stomach and feed him because he's starving. Now they're saying, you know,
actually that's incorrect. We want to take a stomach sample to document that he was actually taking food.
Do you want to take him back into captivity, Stephen?
Absolutely not. Only if that's what's best for him. But right now, what our biggest concern is a full health assessment of the animal to show that he hasn't lost weight, that he is actually feeding, which is what we hope for. And we also really feel very strongly that the satellite tag that is on him is the only way to find him. The North Atlantic is huge. It's the only way they were able to track him from Iceland over to Norway. That satellite tag battery is going to fail in the beginning to mid-October. And so that's only a month away. So they need to change that tag out so that if this reintroduction effort continues, they can track him long term, which is part of the release protocols that was approved by the U.S. government.
I mean, is it obvious that he has to leave the fjords of Norway?
Oh,
is
absolutely. Obviously, the first thing is what's already happening in Ocean Futures and Humane Society are teaching people there what's best for Keiko. You know, give him the space to be a wild whale. He's already been a wild whale. The thing is, I mean, it sounds like, and the ex-trainers made it sound like, there were basically no observations done on Keiko before he kind of headed east. And that's not the case. They're actually out there with a month with other whales.
We're hearing
monitoring Keiko.
We're hearing from Norwegians that it just seems obvious, and we're looking at the video ourselves, and we're able to see this with our own eyes. Keiko is starved for affection. He wants that affection, and do you believe that if people ignore his demands for attention from humans, that he will eventually head back to his orca family?
You know, from what we know about wild whales and what we're learning about Springer, and really the true test is when Springer comes back next summer, but what we're learning now is to orcas, other orcas are a lot more interesting than those bony creatures up on shore than human beings. If given a chance, Keiko will be with wild whales. We just have to get him out, get him back out in the North Atlantic and let him be free. I mean, that's truly what happens here. Orcas do not prefer human beings, and part of the problem that's happening now...
Don't you think Keiko's a special case, though?
Well, absolutely, and there's some that would argue...
heavily conditioned over 23 years
and perhaps too conditioned over the last few years, some would argue. You know, that's the case, and there's a difference in philosophy between the training team in the past and the people who are handling the project now. And there's no better expertise on each team, a different philosophy, a different faith in the capacities of orcas. That's the difference.
Stephen, do you think that there's ever going to come a time when Keiko is going to prefer the companionship of other killer whales?
That's unknown. I mean, that's something that's going to be ongoing to monitor. But, you know, it's interesting talking about the current people taking care of him. We have talked to the staff in Iceland who are actually currently now under severe gag order not to talk to anyone. And it makes us curious that if it's going so well and he's so free, why are they not allowed to talk to anyone if they have nothing to hide?
Okay, and let me ask another question. Let me ask another question, though. If we don't know whether or not Keiko's going to reconnect with wild orcas ever, is that really important, or is it just important that Keiko's out there swimming free?
Can anybody say this is not a success?
Oh, I think it's been a great project. I'm not saying it's a failure, but
this is amazing.
We're talking about continuing in the forward direction of keeping it successful, and it's critical to me that he socially integrates with killer whales.
Absolutely, and who knows?
Is it good enough, though, ultimately, if we have to make a choice, is it good enough if Keiko is eating on his own?
Well, you know, that's where the questions need to be asked. If he's feeding on his own, does he know where to go at what time of year for what stocks of food? Or is he only just eating opportunistically where he is now? Wild killer whales will be able to show him where to go, when to go for what types of food.
I mean, you really think that he'd cross 1,000 miles over 60 days and doesn't know how to feed himself?
I'm not making the statement that he's not. I'm just saying that there's been no documentation.
What he's also saying is maybe Keiko's only capable of feeding himself during certain types of the year when the salmon are plentiful.
Well, you made the comment in the break that L98 is going to run out of fish soon. It could be a very similar situation for Keiko. Yeah, and that's why.
Okay, and I'm going to wrap it up on that note because L98 is going to be the next big orphaned orca that we're going to be keeping our eye on while the debate over how Keiko is doing continues. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. We love a great debate on Northwest Extra. Michael Harris and Stephen Clausen, thank you so much for participating and letting us hear both sides. We'll take your email responses to tonight's Northwest Extra. Just email us at viewercenter@nwcn.com. That's nwcn.com. Keep it right here.